Montferrand, modern-day Syria, 1137. The new Count of Tripoli, Raymond II, has brought an army into Muslim lands to avenge the death of his father Pon. Yet, much to his disappointment, the Burid commander responsible for his death, Buzzawa, has locked himself away in the town of Baalbek. Having no one on whom he could inflict revenge, Raymond decided to confront the Atabeg named Imad ad-Din Zengi, who just happened to be besieging the city of Homs. Surprised by the Tripolitan lord's action, Zengi lifted the siege and decided to move against Raymond. When the Tripolitan force approached Homs, Raymond realized he was outnumbered and began his retreat to Montferrand. Finally catching up with the Latin count, Zengi moved to the Tripolitan castle. Unbeknownst to the Latins, the struggle for this castle marked the rise of a new champion of Islam and his dynasty. Welcome to our latest video on the Second Crusade, where we will cover the Battle of Montferrand and the rise of Zengi. This week, our YouTube members and patrons will continue watching our series on the North African campaign during World War II, as we cover Operation Crusader, during which Rommel faced the Allies once again. The support of our YouTube members and patrons allows us to continue releasing these free videos without worrying about unstable YouTube ad revenue and lets us be more choosy in terms of our sponsors. You can join their ranks via the links in the description and get access to 2 weekly exclusive videos, more than 150 right now, including the series on the Pacific War, Fall of Sparta, First and Second Punic War, Russian Revolutions and the Civil War, Italian Reunification Wars, Albigensian Crusade, History of Prussia, Biography of Sulla, Iberian Reconquista, the World War II North African Campaign, the Persian Wars, and much more. Thanks for your kind support. To better understand the circumstances behind Zengi's rise, we must begin with changes in the Latin Outremer that occurred after the Crusade of 1129. Jerusalem's failure to capture Damascus and Aleppo marked the end of Baldwin II Labor's dreams of the Crusader states expanding beyond the Levant, and this was not the only trouble the aging king faced. On his way home, King Baldwin found out that his favourite Prince of Antioch, Bohemond II, had died in Cilicia in 1130 during his expedition against the Armenian Prince Levon. Bohemond had no son, and his only living heir was just a 2-year-old daughter, Constance, guarded by his now widow and Baldwin's daughter, Princess Elise. This could only mean that the Principality of Antioch would be thrown into another succession crisis. In a bid to preserve her power over the Principality, Elise did the unthinkable and sent a messenger to the powerful Seljuk Atabeg in the east, acknowledging Antioch as a Seljuk tributary in exchange for his protection. The man gladly agreed and moved his army to Antioch. As Baldwin approached Antioch, Elise bribed some of the citizens to lock the gates of the city before the king. If this wasn't bad enough for the king of Jerusalem, some of his knights captured Elise's messenger, who tried to sneak outside the city. The courier's bags contained a secret letter revealing Elise's plans to turn Antioch into a Muslim tributary. The message turned Baldwin livid. The king ordered the messenger to be hanged and Elise to be arrested. Baldwin and Fulk set a camp and summoned Count Joscelin of Edessa to support them. Eager to redeem himself after his previous quarrel with Bohemond, Joscelin answered Baldwin's call and moved against Elise. The stalemate continued under the walls of Antioch for a long time. It was only broken when some Antiochene knights, worried for their city's future, decided to open the gates during the night and let Baldwin inside the city. With the assistance of nobility from all over the Principality, both Latin rulers managed to secure Antioch for the king's arrival. Initially, Elise locked herself in Antioch's citadel in desperation. However, she was eventually convinced to emerge by the notables, who guaranteed her protection. In a humiliating ceremony, the princess was dragged out from the tower and ordered to kneel before Baldwin II. Baldwin II took official regency over Constance, giving Antioch to Joscelin to govern the city in his name while he himself returned to Jerusalem. Thus, the situation in Antioch was stabilized, but one question remained unanswered. Who was this powerful Atabeg that, thanks to Elise, had almost managed to shake Antioch to its core? Why, it was none other than Imad ad-Din Zengi. The origins of Imad ad-Din Zengi are rooted in the political complexity of the Abbasid court. Zengi was a son of Qasim ad-Dawiya Aksunkur al-Hajib, who ruled Aleppo before the Crusades in the name of Sultan Malik Shah I. Despite being born among the Seljuk elite, His upbringing turned upside down in 1094 when his father was executed by Tutush, the ruler of Damascus. After losing his heritage, Zengi took refuge in the city of Mosul, where he served under a succession of local lords, growing into his own as a soldier. In 1111, Zengi took part in the first campaign against the Latins. There he was ordered to besiege Edessa, but was unable to take the city due to a lack of resources. However, it would not be the last time Zengi would stand under those walls. Zengi's loyalty to the Seljuk Sultanate was truly put to the test in 1126, when the Abbasid Caliph al-Mustashid craved independence from Sultan Mahmud II of the Great Seljuks. Eager to quell the revolt, Sultan Mahmud sent a Seljuk army commanded by his captain and subordinate Imad ad-Din Zengi. Proving himself in combat, the young Seljuk commander managed to crush the Caliph's forces at the Battle of Wesit and forced al-Mustashid into Seljuk submission. In September 1127, Zengi took advantage of the assassination of the Atabeg of Mosul and took power in the city, from where he seized control over Nisibis, Sinjar, Haran, and much of northern Iraq. Using the temporary quarrel between the Prince of Antioch Bohemond II and Count of Edessa Joscelin de Courtenay relating to the claim of the fortress of Azaz, Zengi took advantage and seized Aleppo in 1128. After finally reclaiming his ancestral city, Zengi combined the powers of Mosul and Aleppo under a single rule, securing territories in northern Syria and Iraq. Zengi was a polarizing figure in the Muslim world. To some, he was a fearless commander who could inspire thousands to join his cause. Others, however, saw him as ruthless and cruel. Moreover, he was allegedly a heavy drinker, in flagrant violation of the basic rules of Islam. Despite this, Zengi was undeniably the first Atabeg who could fully utilize the call for jihad against the Crusader states. At the beginning of his rule in Aleppo and Mosul, Zengi knew he wasn't ready to fight the Latin states, especially under King Baldwin II's watch. Thus, he temporarily signed a truce with Edessan Count Joscelin, focusing his efforts on consolidating his rising Zengid state. After reclaiming his home city, Zengi decided to continue his expansion towards Damascus. Initially, Zengi tried to convince its emir Buri to join their forces to prosecute the Holy War. Officially, Buri agreed to the alliance, but secretly he distrusted Zengi, fearing the Atabeg's ambitions. Buri's doubts were later confirmed when Zengi captured the Damascene embassy, led by his son Sevinj, and then locked him in the famous citadel of Aleppo. Zengi used Sevinj as his hostage to capture the towns of Menbij and Hama, though his attempt at taking Homs was thwarted by the local garrison. In a matter of 3 years of his reign, Zengi could extend his power from Mosul all the way to Homs. Thus began the long-standing rivalry between the Zengid state and the Emirate of Damascus. Meanwhile, after the events in Antioch, Baldwin II's health began to deteriorate, and the constant stress of carrying the Latin kingdoms upon his back had eventually taken its toll on the King of Jerusalem. In August 1131, it became clear that the death of King Baldwin II was imminent. On his deathbed, Baldwin Labor asked Jerusalem's nobility to move him from his royal palace to the Patriarch's residence near Calvary, where he wanted to die as close to Christ as possible. There, on the 21st of August 1131, Baldwin II passed away. According to Labor's will, the Kingdom of Jerusalem would henceforth be ruled by his daughter Melisande and her husband Fulk of Anjou, who would serve as joint rulers and guardians of their sons Baldwin III and Amalric. Soon after Baldwin's passing, death visited his right-hand man Joscelin as well. As the Count of Edessa was besieging a small Zengid fort near Aleppo, he went into a faulty siege tunnel which collapsed, leaving Joscelin heavily wounded. At the same time, emboldened by his victory over Prince Bohemond, and assuming Joscelin was already dead, the Danishmenid warlord Ghazi attacked the county of Edessa and besieged Kaysan. When news of the Seljuk attack on their homeland reached the Edessan camp, Joscelin initially asked his son, Joscelin II, to ride with their host to meet the Seljuk host in battle. The younger Joscelin refused, stating that the numerical advantage of the Danishmends was too heavy. Angered by this response, Joscelin I got out of bed and dragged himself onto a litter, commanding his force against Danishmend Ghazi despite his injuries. The Seljuk warlord, surprised at the sudden arrival of Joscelin, quickly returned to Anatolia. But the journey cost Joscelin dearly. Overjoyed by this victory, the Edessan Count soon realized that his venture opened his wounds, after which he fell off the litter and died by the nearest roadside, leaving the county of Edessa to his son Joscelin II. And so the reign of the Latin rulers who took the cross in 1095 had finally come to an end. It was time for a new generation of Christian rulers to continue their father's legacy. However, the idea of a unified Latin leadership under the crown of Jerusalem, which had existed under Baldwin II, no longer seemed possible, as the new Latin elite was far more eager to expand their personal influence than to serve Jerusalem willingly. Moreover, the new royal couple in Jerusalem simply did not possess enough authority or strength to simultaneously combine all the Crusader states in the Outremer as their predecessor did. Before Baldwin's body had even gone cold, Princess Elise returned to Antioch in 1131 and convinced the city to not recognize Fulk as their regent. She convinced the Antiochene lords of Zerdana, Sayun, and even the counts of Edessa and Tripoli to join her cause. When Fulk marched out of Jerusalem to punish Elise, the Tripolitan troops blocked key castles at Chastel Rouge and Ascan. Not eager to play on Alice's terms, Fulk used Jerusalem's fleet to sail all the way from Beirut to the harbour of St. Simeon, after which the battle ensued south of Antioch. In the ensuing struggle, King Fulk defeated the rebels. As Elise was forced to return to Latakia, Fulk assumed regency over Constance, appointing the veteran of the Ager-Sanguinis, Renaud Mazois, as the principality's constable to rule in his name. Despite this, Elise was not through with her political machinations. Around 1135, Antioch's patriarch Bernard died, and Renaud Mazois vanished from the records. The new patriarch, Rodolphe of Domfront, had no intention of sharing power with Fulk, and called Elise back to Antioch. This time, Elise outsmarted Fulk by writing a letter to Melisande, who, persuaded by Elise's words, granted the princess safe return from exile. When Fulk again arrived at the principality, he couldn't do anything but watch as Antioch slipped from his grasp. Despite Elise's resistance, she had little to no support within the city walls. She knew that this time, Zengi wouldn't risk a march on Antioch, with Fulk present in Syria. So Elise decided to send letters to Roman Emperor John Komnenos, promising Antioch as a Byzantine vassal, and marriage between her daughter Constance and the future Emperor Manuel in exchange for her and Constance's protection. Though this recipe for Byzantine-Latin cooperation had initial merit, bypassing the opinion of the Antiochene nobility and clergy turned the whole city against her, including her former ally, Patriarch Rodolphe. Fulk took advantage of this, opening negotiations with the Antiochene elites to install one Duke William of Aquitaine as leader of Antioch. Realizing her defeat, Elise retired to Latakia, never to return. As Antioch went through another crisis, Zengi's ambitions to seize Damascus were temporarily halted by the events taking place in Baghdad. In September 1131, Sultan Mahmud ibn Muhammad died, plunging the Great Seljuk Empire into yet another civil war. Mahmud had been a close ally of Zengi's, which meant that wrong choices could threaten Zengi's position in the Sultanate. The lands of the Great Seljuks were divided between Mahmud's sons and other claimants, among which was one Masud of Fars. As Masud had the least support among all the claimants within the Eastern Seljuk nobility, he asked Zengi for help. On June 1132, they jointly marched on Baghdad. Being freed from the Sultan's grip, Caliph Mustashid took control of the city and sent an army to confront the claimant and the Atabeg. As Zengi's army marched carelessly through Iraq, it was soundly defeated by the Caliph's forces at Samarra, near modern-day Tikrit. Zengi and Masud managed to flee the battlefield. Still, Zengi's political career might have ended right there, if not for the support of a local Kurdish governor of Tikrit, Najm al-Din Ayyub, who was incidentally the father of a certain Salah ad-Din. From that day forward, the Ayyubid clan gained Zengi's trust and rose rapidly to prominence under the Atabeg's command. Eventually, Zengi managed to regroup his forces with Masud. Together they renewed their offensive on Baghdad, but this offensive was also a tactical failure and ended in their withdrawal. A few years later, in 1135, Zengi attempted to take Damascus, but was unable to exploit the political turmoil going on in the former Umayyad capital to subdue the city. Unwilling to dissuade his followers from jihad against the Latins, back in 1133, Zengi had sent his second-in-command, Sawar, to raid Tripolitan territory. Paul, the Count of Tripoli, rode out to repel these raids, but was ambushed and forced to find refuge in the Montferrand castle. Fulk decided to help Paul, and after assembling a quick relief force, scattered the Turkoman raiders near the castle. This act improved relations between Jerusalem and Tripoli. Meanwhile, Sawar decided to redirect his raids onto the county of Edessa. Joscelin II did not possess the same tactical genius as his father did. Leaving the safety of Edessa, he was defeated by the Zengid host and retreated to Tobessel with his army in shambles. The Zengid leader camped his army at Kinethrin. At that point, Fulk and Paul's army had finally arrived. By combining their forces, they made a successful night attack on the Zengid camp. Despite Fulk's success and his triumphal return to Jerusalem, the Sawar raids only intensified due to increasing numbers of followers willing to fight for Zengi. This only escalated when Zengi's ally, Masud, managed to rout the Abbasid Caliph's army at the Battle of Daimag in June 1135. The Caliph was exiled to Azerbaijan, where he was murdered by the assassins, most likely with Masud's guidance. Zengi's gamble to support Masud had paid off. The new sultan gained power in Baghdad and installed a new caliph as his puppet. Now favoured by the Seljuk Sultan, perhaps the most powerful Muslim leader in the world, Zengi had a powerful ally at his back, especially against the Christian Franks. This gave Zengi all the supplies and manpower he needed to expand his territory into not only Damascus but also the Latin states. Not wanting to delay his promises, Zengi made his first strike in 1135. He rejoined his forces with a newly acquired army from Iraq. This time, Zengi was not satisfied with just raiding. By testing Latin defences, the Atabeg concluded that the Principality of Antioch would turn out to be the weakest scale in the Crusader state's armour. Moreover, by cutting off the Principality of Antioch from the county of Edessa, Zengi could lay a staging ground for further invasions on the Edessan territory. His calculations proved to be correct. The Atabeg's army swept through western Syria and the Orontes Valley, successfully besieging Kafatab, Ma'arat an-Numan, Ma'arat Misrin, Zardana, and Athareb. In response to his successes on the Latin front, Zengi renewed his offensive to the south by taking advantage of the infighting between Damascus and Tripoli. In 1136, Yusuf, Emir of Damascus, was murdered by his Mamluk Bazawash due to his unpopular policy of maintaining peace with the Franks. Bazawash then fled to Baalbek with his retainers, threatening to return with an army if the Burids refused to renew fighting with the Latins. Reluctant, the newly appointed Emir Mahmud agreed, and in the next year, Bazawash invaded the county of Tripoli. He and his Damascene army used wealth and religious tensions between the Latin elite and local Syrian Christians living near Mount Lebanon to move through the Lebanon passes. This allowed the Burid forces to penetrate through the Tripolitan defences. Upon hearing the news of Damascus's sudden attack, Count Paul was yet again taken completely off guard. Assembling a contingent of his knights, Paul rushed from Tripoli to retake the initiative, but upon seeing the Muslim force, he fled into the mountains. There he was betrayed by the locals, handed over to the enemy, and killed. The sudden death of Paul left Tripoli paralysed, and if not for Basawash's unwillingness to push for the city itself, the county of Tripoli's existence could be threatened. Rule over Tripoli was left to Paul's 22-year-old son, Rimor II. Unlike his cynical, opportunist father, Rimor was much more hot-tempered and eager to confront his opponents directly. Eager for vengeance, the new Tripolitan count sent a punitive expedition against border Muslim and Christian Armenian communities. Confident in his abilities to uphold Lebanon for Tripoli, he decided to bring the fight to Muslim lands. Sadly for the count, Bazawash retreated to Baalbek and refused to fight. Thus, Rimor decided to confront Zengi, who at that time was besieging the city of Homs, governed by Burid governor Unur. Surprised by the Tripolitans' action, Zengi lifted the siege and decided to move against Rimor. When the Tripolitan force approached Homs, Rimor realized he was outnumbered and began his retreat to the castle of Montferrand, with Zengi pursuing hot on his heels. Seeing little chance of defeating Zengi by himself, Rimor II sent letters to King Fulk asking for help. The King of Jerusalem answered the call and quickly amassed his forces to move out against Zengi. However, this sense of urgency proved to be disastrous for Latin logistics. Upon hearing about Fulk's approach, Zengi initially thought of lifting the siege, but when he realized just how badly prepared the Frankish army was, he decided to rush forward with his army and face the Latins in battle. Just as the Franks came out of the hills close to the castle, the Turkomans and Syrians descended upon them, resulting in most of the Latins being slain on the battlefield. Only a handful of knights were taken captive together with Remor, while Fulk fled with his retainers back to the castle. It was now Fulk's turn to be rescued. He sent messages to the Patriarch of Jerusalem, William, Remor of Poitiers, and Joscelin II. Sensing the direness of the situation, the Latins ignored other risks and banded together in an attempt to rescue the king. Luckily for Jerusalem, Fatimid Egypt had been embroiled in a civil war, meaning Jerusalem could focus all its efforts on relieving Montferrand. All the Latin hosts met at Bucay, after which Remor, Joscelin, and the Patriarch moved against Zengi. Meanwhile, the situation around the castle was becoming dire for Fulk and his men. Zengi prepared for an all-out siege, and with the assistance of 10 mangonels, the walls began to give in. To add insult to injury, the supplies at Montferrand were running low, and with no reinforcements looming on the horizon, Fulk sent a herald to Zengi to consider the terms of Montferrand's surrender. Their terms were quite generous for the Latin king. In exchange for handing over the fortress, Fulk could leave it freely with all his men, followed by no ransom. As the king was returning back to Jerusalem, Fulk rejoined with his relief force. Despite seemingly insignificant gains, Zengi's capture of Montferrand allowed the Syrian Atabeg to gain control of the upper Orontes valley. Moreover, with Hama captured, Zengi could operate between Syria more freely. The victory at Montferrand and expansion of the Zengid state gained Zengi a reputation amongst the Latins as a force to be reckoned with. By weakening the power of Damascus, Zengi gained significant strength and determination to crush the Franks. Both of these traits he would find helpful, as the Atabeg would have to face one more challenge for his rule, the might of Constantinople itself. In our next video, we will witness how the Crusader states will be challenged not only by Zengi, but also by Roman Emperor John Komnenos himself. How will the Latin kingdoms respond to these threats? Will they swallow their pride and stand together behind the banner of King Fulk, or plunge Latin Syria into disaster? Will Zengi fulfill his promises of jihad to his men and his growing empire? All of these questions shall be answered on the fields of Edessa. This series will soon continue. To ensure you don't miss it, make sure you are subscribed and have pressed the bell button. Please consider liking, subscribing, commenting and sharing, it helps immensely. Recently, we have started releasing weekly Patreon and YouTube member exclusive content. Consider joining their ranks via the link in the description or button under the video to watch these weekly videos, learn about our schedule, get early access to our videos, access our private Discord, and much more. This is the Kings and Generals channel, and we will catch you on the next one.